Yes, he would ask when the pilgrim reached the threshold, I have come to see the holy man. Follow me, please. He or she would follow the small man through the house, along a hallway with doorways open to various rooms, into which the pilgrim could peek hastily, but the monkey head was moving so very quickly through the house that the pilgrim couldn't linger, but literally had to rush after it. In no time at all, they had passed through the entire first floor of the house and were at a large door similar to the one the pilgrim had entered. It was the back door. The monk opened it wide and said, Goodbye. But I've come to see the holy man, said the visitor plaintively. You've seen me, he gently replied. And the next thing the pilgrim knew he would be outside, the door solidly closed behind him. This is why the line moved so rapidly, and how the holy man got to see so many people, or so many people got to see him. The trip through the house was 20 seconds. Add another 20 for greetings and partings, and another 20 for returning to the front door, and what you have is a person a minute. Most times the holy man would add, if you look on everyone you meet as a holy person, you will be happy, which added 7 seconds. Rushing back and forth through the house in this way was a lot of footwork for the holy man, who was 72 years old, so periodically he took 5-minute rests. Rarely, but sometimes, which were happy times for him, he sat down and talked to a pilgrim. 3rd chapter, Feelings. What did the pilgrims feel about being given such short shrift after the long inchworm trudge up the mountain? Most of them, like most people everywhere, were nice. Maybe per capita there were more nice people in the line than elsewhere because of the very nature of the destination. Good people wanting to be better people. Still, even the nicest among them, when the door shut on their departure, felt some of these feelings. Wronged, hurt, cheated, disappointed, betrayed, ill-used, and angry. But it was amazing how fleeting this letdown was. Because as they stood outside the door, somewhat dazed, feeling any or all of the above, they began to review their visit to the holy man and to understand. The door had been opened to them. How many places would this happen in a world of peepholes, locks, bolts, and bars? The door had been opened wide, and the one-man reception committee had stood there, eyes alight, a small smile, saying, Yes? How may I help you? Kind of yes. Whereas the pilgrim had not greeted him at all, had not introduced himself, had not said, Hello, how are you? May I please come in? But instead, full of his own importance, his own mission, had treated the door opener as the lowliest servant, saying, I have come to see the holy man. And the door opener, realizing that the visitor's mission had already been accomplished, showed him out. Thinking this, the pilgrim felt very sorry about his behavior and vowed he would come again next summer and do differently. He tried to remember what the holy man looked like, and he couldn't, because he hadn't looked at him. He wouldn't recognize him if the same man opened the door next year. But no matter, he would be courteous and respectful to whosoever opened the door. In fact, he would be gracious to everyone from now on, imagining that everyone was the holy man, that everyone indeed had holiness in him. This would be very hard. Still, he would try, because that was what he had learned from the holy man. And it was a huge, wonderful, staggering lesson. And it meant that even he himself was a holy person somewhat. His heart swelled, and he went down the mountain path exulting, I have seen the holy man, I have seen him. And as he thought this, the face of the holy man did begin to form in his mind's eye, like a photograph developing, because even though he hadn't looked at the man, now he knew that he had seen him. In the years to come, sometimes the holy man's face would flash upon his inward eye, and he would feel a catch in his throat, the pricking rush of tears to his eyes at the sight of the beloved visage. As the years went by, he felt more and more moved by his visit to the holy man, which had informed his life from that day forward. Isn't it wonderful? And the whole thing is about the people in the line coming up and everything. The whole thing is all taking place. And you go into the angry man, the drunkard, the fearful woman, lovers, the grieving man, the famous man, violence, kindness, the rogue, punishment, ego, just a whole list of things. And each chapter is just 2 or 3 pages, and it's just absolutely wonderful. Okay? Now then, I suppose I should collect your $15 fee. Which I've always remembered to do things like this. I'm remembering. Oh, you.
Well, I have to.
Let me see.
I don't know if I've got any. What do we need? Change?
I need 2 5s.
Let's see what I've got. I don't know if I've got that many ones. I actually have 2 5s.
That's fantastic. Well, we'll get changed for this when we get someplace tonight. Okay.
Oh, I got it.
All right. We'll have to get changed somewhere for you. I think I've got 2 5s at home I can give you. Now you have been
I'm
through...
not really here. She keeps looking at me. I'm not really here.
She brought me. She's taken this class several times.
Dozen times, I think, already.
Right. The first thing, you've been there, so we'll do it again. Do you feel guilty about anything you've ever done? Good. You don't need to tell me what, but I want you to think of one and make it an important one. Okay? When you think of something, if you no longer feel guilty, think of something you regret, okay? All right, Paul?
Mm-hmm.
He's had a different class of mine, although he hasn't had this one. All right.
Yeah. Think of something you regret.
If you don't feel guilty, if you still feel guilty, think of something you feel guilty about. If you've gotten rid of that, think of something you regret, having been dumb enough to, or immature enough, or whatever, okay? But think of something you feel guilty about if you feel guilty, okay? Now fill in this sentence regarding the thing you feel guilty about. I would have done it differently if only I'd had more blank. You don't need to be unique. You can answer it any way you like. You can fill it in with more than one thing. I will tell you, the most common words for filling it in are awareness, understanding, knowledge. The patience, courage, all kinds of things can be used to fill it in. And I simply want to know how you filled it. I would have done it differently if only I had more. What?
If I'd been more independent or had more.
If you felt more independent. Okay? I would have done it differently if only I had more what?
Understanding.
Okay. Well, the minute you fill it in, you prove you're not guilty. Because guilt says you could have done it differently and chose a lesser course. You said you didn't. There was something you didn't have enough of to have done it differently. Therefore, it wasn't a matter of choice. It was a matter of not having grown enough to have been able to do it. Okay? Does that make sense to you? Think of something else you feel guilty about. Okay? I would have done it differently if only I had more, what?
Sense.
The thing we call common sense, which is all too uncommon? Okay. I'll draw the thing for you. I will be teaching it from back there, but there's one little bit I'm going to be down here, okay? Sometimes during this class, some other people may come in because some parts of it are offered in individual classes. Like the 4th, 5th, and 6th week all are.
So you might want some light.
Yes, you can't see it if I don't turn on the chalkboard light. All right. This society runs on 3 illusions. And the first one is guilt. You ever had a cat, by the way? You ever tried to make it feel guilty? Ever been able to make it feel guilty about anything? No way, Jose. You can't make a dog feel guilty either. You just make it miserable that you're upset with it. So it's time we got to be at least as smart as a cat. Huh?
Should give you a copy.
Oh. There is a reality that replaces the illusions. And the reality is you're responsible for what you did. And there is a huge difference between guilt and responsibility. What you're responsible for is working on gaining what you didn't have enough of. That's your responsibility. Make sense? Guilt holds you in the past, feeling bad about who you are because of what you weren't. And that's ridiculous. None of us is born perfect. We all have to grow. And we shouldn't feel bad about the fact that we were immature. We should simply accept that we are here learning. We're becoming. Make sense? Good. So get rid of the thing you carried around in your back called guilt. You take each and everything you feel guilty about, and you find out what you didn't have enough of. And you will see your responsibility. And you will discover that you've even achieved what your responsibility was in some cases, and you're still running with the guilt. So you've actually learned what you didn't know, and you've acquired it, and yet you're still buying into guilt, which is ridiculous. Does that make sense? The most common guilt trips in this society are, if you loved me, you'd do this. Or if you were smart, you'd do this. Both of them intended to get you to behave in some way you wouldn't at that moment naturally behave. If you love me, you will do what your love causes you to do, not necessarily what I want. You may not be comfortable with what I want, you may not be able to do it. It may not be in your nature to be what I want you to be. But in loving, you will offer what you are to someone. And you should not think that someone will be what you want them to be. Look and see what they are and accept the parts of it that you can. Because everybody touches more than one person. And each of us has things to offer to different people. Nobody can get all they are hoping for in life from any one other person. Okay? By the way, if you have any questions, arguments, anything, please feel free. I'm very good with those. They give me an opportunity to talk more. Do you feel like have you ever failed in a relationship? Yes? Now, my personal opinion is, no. You successfully completed it. What did you learn from having been in it? Didn't you learn what you could or couldn't be for someone else? What they could or couldn't be for you? What strengths you had, your ability to go on? Didn't you learn from it? You see, it was a learning experience. It wasn't a failure at all. Failure is the second illusion. That's the second thing we carry around on our backs. You are not guilty of failing. You're responsible for growing. That's what life's about. Life is about becoming aware of what we don't yet have and need to develop. That's our responsibility. Taking it and becoming, growing. That's what it's all about. And it's a joy. There's pain in it, but basically life is a joyful experience of becoming. Right? Does this all make sense? Well, good. I'm the happiest person I know, and I've been living this for 70 years, so. Fortunately, I didn't have parents who thought I was guilty of anything. They just thought it was a wonder that they had me. They were both in their early 30s when they married. And I was an only child, so to them I was a wonder. So, they simply saw me as someone who needed to grow, not someone who was guilty or failing. the illusion. The thing you don't want and don't need. And the great tragedy, really great tragedy, is this whole society, in fact most of the world, is running on guilt. And as long as it's running on guilt, it never learns to accept responsibility. Because you see, people can say, you're responsible for this. That's just a form of guilt. Responsibility can only come from, I accept responsibility. Responsibility is a thing that I have to reach out and accept. It can't be assigned to me. Not really. Now, in business, the boss can say, you're responsible for this. That doesn't mean I can do it. But it means that's what this job requires, and if I can't do it, maybe I shouldn't be in this job. But he can't make me, even in that case, responsible. He can only say what he wants to get from me, and it's up to me to reach out and accept the responsibility for learning how to do it. Okay? If I want to stay working there. Responsibility you reach out for. And because people are taught that they're guilty, most people spend a great deal of their energy trying to dump the guilt on somebody else, to run away from the guilt, to hide from the guilt, to say they aren't guilty, and never learn to accept the responsibility because they don't understand. Because if you're taught to be guilty, you buy it, but you're also trying to duck it. You're trying to get away from it, right? Can you see how that works? By the way, if you have a question, if you don't really understand anything I say, please tell me so, and I'll see if I can come at it from a different direction. The third illusion approval. Again, you can go to your cat. Your cat doesn't fail. Cat may miss a mouse or whatever, but it just keeps going at it or playing with it or whatever. Cats don't think in terms of guilt and failure, and they certainly don't think in terms of needing your approval. Now, a dog, because it is a pack animal, needs approval. But man is unique. Man is the only creature I know of that is both the rugged individual that a cat is and a pack animal. We want to belong, but we have a need to be independent. And they're not in conflict with each other. We have them simultaneously. So we have the need to be who we are. And if you'll think of somebody you know of who has a lot of approval, I'll tell you something that is true about them. Whoever you think of. They don't give a hang whether you approve of them or not. The examples I like to use in class are George Brett and Whoopi Goldberg. They are busy being who they are. And the only people who get approval, by the way, have you ever tried to get approval from somebody? The more you do, the more they demand, right? By the way, that's not actually what they're thinking. It is what happens. But you'll do it to other people. If you want someone to do something for you, you're not going to go to somebody who doesn't do things for you. Instead, you'll go to somebody who's done things for you, right? Well, you see, you're not thinking in terms of giving them approval. You're thinking in terms of getting something done. They, on the other hand, are trying to get your approval, which isn't where you're coming from at all. So it seems like you just keep demanding more, but it isn't really that. It's just the way it works, and it's all really crazy. Now, there are people that wish to control you, and in wanting to control you, they will dangle approval, but never give it. But they're really screwed up because they're not busy being who they are. They are thinking in terms of they are somehow, their strength, their power, their essence comes from who they can control, which never is so. So they're worse off than you are. They're worse off than the people trying to do things for them and get their approval. But approval, if you will be who you are, And that's what this class is all about, helping you learn to come from your own center, to discover who you are and be it. And this class is only the beginning of getting you there. Nobody can teach it to you. Nobody can tell you who you are. You're unique. You've never existed before. You're a unique intersection of every single force in the universe. And even if you reincarnate, you'll be in a different place, a different time. It'll be a different intersection. And since you've never been before, nobody else can tell you who you should be or how you should do it. You have to discover it. And if you do, you will find that you attract to you people who can appreciate what you are. And the fascinating thing is you will appreciate what they are. Just like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. When one fits the other fits it. And that's the way approval is. Nobody ever got approval by seeking it. Everybody who has approval is busy being who they are, and there's such a rightness to it that anybody who can appreciate it will. It's really that simple. So that's the illusion. By the way, the thing you're most often guilty of is failing to have approval. Okay? Instead, it's about being and becoming. You're simply responsible for growing and becoming whoever you can be. That's it. Isn't that wonderful? That's what your life is about. It's what my life is about. It's what hers and his. Everybody's life is about becoming who you uniquely are or who I uniquely am. Over here, somebody else at the center of your life trying to tell you who you are, what you should be, that you need their approval. But over here, you are at the center. You are responsible for growing and becoming who you can be. Okay? And that's the first part of any class I teach. Does this make sense to you? Then I want you to say something out loud, both of you, along with me. I have the right to be who I am. Can you say that? I have the right to be who I am. And I accept the responsibility for becoming whoever I can be. I accept the responsibility for becoming whoever I can be. Very good. Now you have the right to make changes that you may have been told you didn't have the right to do. Because you have empowered yourself to be the ultimate voice in this world for who you are. Okay? Isn't that marvelous? Mm-hmm. Of course, you've been there before, because I did this in a different class. Now, there's one other thing we want you to know. You can't forgive anybody for what they are. Because in order to forgive, first you have to assign guilt. But they're no more guilty than you are. They may not know it, but they are responsible. And if you will let go of the need for guilt and instead understand that they are immature, that what people do comes from their pain and their need to grow. If you do that, then you find you don't have any pain from what they are anymore. You may be sad for what they are, and you may be very sad because you can't help them to get beyond it. But you won't have the pain of, it happened to me, it was done to me. Does this make sense? Does it help? This is a thing some people can accept right away, and some people work for a while learning to accept. But I guarantee you, if you will come from a place of understanding instead of a place of blaming, your own life will become more joyful. It will be easier. And when people do dumb things, and people will do dumb, hurtful things, you just see them as children. And when you do dumb, hurtful things, you see yourself as a child and understand it's about growing and becoming what we can be, not about getting it right the first time always. Because that's what it is about. And then I have over here success. There's nothing wrong with success. But success is only a momentary place on a journey. And instead of success, it's simply learning. It's all about learning and growing and becoming, okay? And the reason I have pride over there with guilt is if guilt is one side of the coin, then pride is the other side. Because the side that is guilt says, you could have done it and didn't. And pride says, I did it and you could have. Or my kids did it and yours could have. When we say, I'm proud of myself, the person I'm saying it to feels sort of put down by it. Does that make sense? But if I say, I am so happy that I achieved this, or that my kids did it, you don't feel put down by it. You don't feel put down by my joy, although you feel put down by my pride. You should have a sense of your own worth. But you shouldn't, but it is the word pride, not the concept, but the word that gets in the way of things. Okay?
So, what do you say to yourself?
Couldn't you equally say, I'm happy for myself? And thank you, Lord, for helping me to get there, Really. That's better than I'm proud of myself. It's as if you did it all on your own. Yes. Nobody does anything all on their own. They may not have another person helping them, but nobody does it all on their own. They have a spiritual strength that helps them, that supports them. And so when you say, oh, thank you for helping me to be able to achieve this, it's more realistic. And it's more realistic in what you can do in the future because you're recognizing you're a part of a greater whole. Okay? It's very hard not to say I'm proud of you to your children because we're so used to doing it. But the fascinating thing is, I'm so proud of you is so simple to say. But if you don't say that, you're going to have to say a lot more. You're going to have to say, this is wonderful, you have done it. You're going to have to go into details. And believe me, that feeds them more than I'm proud of you. Okay? And I'm sure you've said I love you to somebody, haven't you? How often do you say I like you to somebody? Right. The fascinating thing is when you say I love you, you're telling the person something about you. You're saying I'm someone who has the capacity to love you. When you say I like you, you're saying something about the person. You're saying you have qualities that cause me to like you. So I like you is a more powerful statement than I love you, even though we all want to hear I love you. And there's nothing wrong with saying I love you. Don't misunderstand me. I mean, I say both. But don't forget how powerful I like you is in consolidating what the person is and causing them, particularly when you say, you know, I love your sense of humor. I really enjoy being with you because you're so comfortable. Whatever it is, when you're telling the person what they are, you're reinforcing it and helping it to become even stronger. And that's very good. Okay?
Well, I've always heard that when you're talking to someone, when you personalize it like that, I like you because you're fun. You're personalizing it to the person, or you can be doing it as a behavior.
You're talking about trying to control them?
No. When you're telling somebody something positive, you can say, I like you, or I like you, trying to say, or you're liking them because of their behavior, not because of just who they are.
No, you love them because they exist. That's what the Bible says. You should love everyone.
Right.
But you don't have to like everyone. But you love them because you are a loving person. And because they exist, you love them. You do not love a person because of what they are. Because of the very nature of what they are. But you do like them. You may like them simply because you see in them God. You may like them for many different reasons. But it is a stronger thing in helping a person to be out of what they are. In saying, I like you. It's that.
Kind of, yeah.
I hear what you're saying, and I'm not saying it's not so.
Well,
There are sometimes too. It's like being It's really like the cat and the dog. It's like being both the independent and the pack animal. There are both ways of looking at it, and neither one is wrong. Okay. So I'm not saying throw out the way you were talking about. I'm saying yes, use it, but use this other one too. Give you a greater way of seeing and dealing with things, because they're both true. Anything I tell you, I want you to understand what I say, but you don't have to accept it. It's very important that you understand what I'm saying, so you can decide where it fits into what you're doing and how much you want to use of it. That's important to me. But I'm not trying to create clones, because that's not who we are. I want you to discover absolutely what you are, that is joyful and positive, and what you contribute. Because that's what we're here for. Okay? Any other questions? Okay. That's the triangles, basically. Actually, maybe since I'll tell you where I came from if you're interested. When I was 12, I was at a church camp. And at night, when I went to say my prayers, that was fine. And the others were sleeping and I was still awake. And I had an incredible thing happen. I had a conversation with God. Now the voice was absolute. And I was surprised, and I remember thinking I was surprised it didn't wake anybody else up. It isn't that it's that loud, but absolutely the omniscience, the omnipotence, the total power, the total knowledge, absolutely unquestioning is there. And I do not remember what was said. I remember that I said, that God asked me something about what I wanted to be, and I said I wanted to help people. I remember that much, but I don't remember the words in which it was said or anything. But the next day, I remember exactly what happened. Because the next day, when I went to say the Lord's Prayer, I was suddenly, for the first time in my life, talking to someone I'd met. And you don't speak to someone you've met the same way we generally pray. When we pray, particularly when we're using a prayer that's been taught to us, we all have an idea of what they mean, and we say the words, and this idea is sort of in awareness there. But we choose our words deliberately when we speak to someone to convey exactly what we want. And the first thing that happened was, I said, "Our Father which art in heaven," and I was thinking for the first time, really thinking about God as a parent. I happen to have wonderful parents who had weaknesses, but they were really wonderful parents. And I realized that everything my earthly parents were, God was, but on a grander scale. And for the first time, I really saw him as this heavenly parent. Not some remote, distant, but I mean someone I'd met, someone who talked to me, but a parent. And of course my parents did talk to me. And when I said, "Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven," I actually stopped and talked to God about it. I said, you do your part, I'll do my part, Others will do their part. That's what this means. All of us together will bring this about. And so I knew that's what that meant, and I could go on saying it without having to take it apart each time. Most of it was very much just exactly as we stated. So I didn't have to come up with explanations or things like this. But when I got to forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us, the minute that was out of my mouth, I said, hold on, wait a minute, I don't want that, that's insane. I don't want you to forgive me the way I forgive others because I don't do that good a job. Somehow, in translating it, we've turned around what Jesus had to have taught us. That cannot possibly be what he taught us. And since they didn't have punctuation, all kinds of things back then, that's not all surprising that could happen. Anyway, I started then saying, help me learn to forgive others as you forgive me. And it didn't matter whether I was in a church with other people or in my own bedroom at night. My own bedroom at night, I could say it slowly. If I was in church, I'd have to say it pretty fast because it's a little longer than what we normally say. But that's what I began to ask for, that God help me to learn to forgive others as he forgives me. Well, because I'd already equated God to my parents on a grander scale, it didn't take but 2 or 3 weeks, and I realized that didn't make any sense. Because if my parents didn't forgive me, but understood that I was a child learning to grow, certainly God did too. So then I had to change it again. And then I had to say, help me learn to understand others as you understand me. And what I don't understand, help me to forgive. And that's the way I began saying it. For about a year. And at the end of, by the time I was 13, I never had to add that last part. Because I had come to understand that every person is coming from their pain and their need to grow. And there was nothing to forgive. Sometimes in understanding that, I could see what their need was. Sometimes I couldn't. And sometimes when I could see what their need was, there was something that I could offer them, and sometimes there wasn't. And when I offered it, sometimes they accepted it, and sometimes they didn't. All of these were incidental, but the main thing was whether I understood exactly, whether I had something to offer, whether what I offered was accepted or not. Always, at the bottom line was, I understood that people are coming from where they are, and there really wasn't anything to forgive. And it was many years later that I wrote down the triangles when I started teaching classes. I'm a minister, so I became a minister, obviously. I mean, this was a path I was on from the time I was 12. Maybe it's a path I was always on. But anyway, that's where this all came from. Okay? Now then, for this class, I have this. Happiness. You cannot have everything at once in one lifetime. You are a man or a woman, an adult or a child, married or single. This life has infinite possibilities within the limits of such factors. Each choice we make cuts off possibilities, but still leaves infinite potential. I believe that 70 to 85% of all illness is capable of becoming wellness. I also believe that the remaining 15 to 30% represent limits of the physical body which can serve to direct us towards certain meaningful growth and expression in this life. Just as the environment we are born into and grow up in gives each of us a different awareness of life than others have. These do not limit what we can become or how completely we can express or make a connection to the God force within us. They merely define our unique expression of that force in this life. Not everyone who reaches out or inward to God will achieve all they reach for. Some will. Some will achieve part. But one thing is certain, one who does not reach will never achieve. So reach for everything you desire to be and find joy in all you become. The broader you reach, the more you will achieve. Reaching for success measured by others is pointless. If you are being you, you have achieved success in God's eyes, and your life is joyful, the greatest reward possible. It's interesting, going back to the one, when I said some will achieve all they reach for and some will achieve part, but some who achieve only part of what they reach for achieve more than the ones who achieve all they reach for. So don't measure it by how much of your reach is accomplished. Okay? Just reach to become who you are. And it's what flows out of you that is really all important. Any questions about that? Any arguments?
I have a question about prayer.
Okay.
When we pray, what exactly are we doing? Are we communicating with God? Are we reaching out to God?
I personally believe you're reaching inward. My personal belief is that the Holy Spirit is within each of us, and that is our connection to God. And it's always there. God never turns his back on us. We may turn away from God, but God's always there. Never, ever does God leave us. And it is through the Holy Spirit that, to me, the Trinity is absolutely real and alive in each and every human being. Because there is the Father, the creative, generative force. There is the Holy Spirit, which is more feminine in its very nature. It is that part that connects us to the other. It's represented by a word you would understand by Mach. Very, very much, the force of Mach. And that's order, harmony, justice, balance, rightness. There's everything that works to help us to become all we can be, but it's also everything that expresses what each thing in the universe is. Each one has its own part of the order. Man's the only one that has to get his own act together and create our order out of some of the chaos of what we are.
So I've heard it mentioned before.
But when you pray, I was a teenager, young teenager, and I was loaned a book by a Catholic bishop. And in it was one thing that he wrote was marvelous, and I began to do it. And that was even before this, I guess. It was after this other experience. When you pray, pray audibly. Okay? It doesn't say you have to pray loudly, but make sound with your prayer, or do it in writing. But pray audibly. And the sound is more powerful just a little bit than the writing. But you can not look at a thing, but you can't not hear a thing, even if you don't focus on hearing. Okay? It's about the power of the spoken word. And the ancient Egyptians, years later, I came to understand why. And that was through meeting my husband, who taught hieroglyphics and ancient Egyptian history and all of this. And they understood that there are levels within the human unconscious which do not hear thought. But every level hears sound. Now those levels will also see what's written, but they will hear sound. Therefore, when you pray audibly, you're reaching every level of yourself, and there is no conflict in what's in there. This is why lying is such a mess. When you lie, you are thinking a truth, and you are saying an untruth. And these levels that don't hear thought, that aren't aware of thought, believe the untruth. It's why people trip over their own lies, have trouble remembering, because they're putting two different things into themselves. And although they are few, still the levels that hear what is said and don't receive just the thought are going to work at counter purposes to the rest. So if you're going to lie, for pity's sakes, tell yourself the truth first. And also, tell yourself why you consider that lying is valid in this case, or your unconscious will begin to believe that lying and truth are equal. Okay? But the thing is, I found from listening from what the bishop wrote, that when I did pray audibly, it seemed to have a greater power. But it was 20 years later, 10 years later, something like that. I don't know, 20 years later, before I encountered the ancient Egyptian teachings and understood that the power of the spoken word is more than the power of the thought word. Okay? Good question.
So, the effect that we have while praying, can we have that same effect through our intent? Can we pray?
All right, it's not. Remember,
with
I'm
intent?
going to be offering a class on intention, on the values of intention.
Okay, sign it.
All right, understand what he's talking about by intention. What he's talking about is for you to discover who you are and the universe's or God's intention for you. When you discover what intention the universe has for you to be, there's no communicating back to it. It already knows. It's you getting in touch with that intention that is what's important, not you telling your unconscious what you intend to do. It's important to tell your unconscious what you intend to do. It's much more important to find out what the universe has as your intention. Now, but you can do it the other way. For example, when I heard Dyer speak, it was on PBS, and they said for $365 pledge. And it's the only way you could get the whole set, which included the CDs, but the DVDs, plus also the 12 CDs, or the CDs of a $12 special seminar you'd have and the book. And I knew when I heard him that I wanted to offer this to people who'd like to come through the university. But I didn't have $365. Neither Pat didn't have $365. But I knew it was the right thing to do. I felt that the intention was absolutely right. And so I said, okay. I called him and said, send it to me and put it on a credit card. The next thing I knew, Amber and Nick asked me to marry them, which was a delightful thing to do. And then he ended up giving me $100, which I hadn't, for the interpass, which I hadn't expected. And a number of other things came. So all the money ended up being there by the time the credit card bill came. But that was getting in touch with the intention of the universe. This was something I just felt we should do, no matter whether one person shows up or 20 show up, to offer this so people can see it, who might not be watching TV, watching a football game or something, who don't want to go through all the pledge drives. But to me, what he has to say is so powerful that I wanted to be able to do this. And I called Rick at the university and said I wanted to do this too. So by getting in touch with this intention, the universe just provided everything that was needed. So it is important to talk to God. It's important to pray when somebody dies, when I have to comfort somebody. My prayers are always to help them in whatever way they most need to go on. But I don't usually talk about what the person was. Usually what I talk to people about when somebody dies is, it's okay that you're angry. Because anger is a part of grief, and most people feel bad about being angry. I said, hey, that's okay, it's natural, it's part of grief. And I talk to them about other things. Sometimes I talk about what the person has done. But I am more concerned with helping the person with where they are right now than the person is dead. And when somebody tells me somebody is very ill, I cannot pray for the person to be well. Not myself, not my husband, not anybody. My husband is deceased. I can only pray, help me in whatever way to be an instrument of helping them, whether it's to pass or to stay. I'm not the one who should judge, but God judge. I learned the lesson the hard way. I was very young, and I've asked for 2 specific things, and I got them, and wished I hadn't. Because I didn't see the consequences. Or one thing I was happy to get, but the consequences were devastating to the person. And this wasn't even for me, this was for someone else. And I never again asked for specifics in that way. But the second time I learned not to make a bargain with God, because He always has His side of the bargain you haven't yet heard. It's not that it's necessarily unpleasant. They all come as lessons, and they all come in positive ways. But pray with your heart. Listen to your heart. And the best thing you can pray for is to just ask for guidance, ask to understand, and listen to the still small voice. We used to call it the still small voice. They don't do it today anymore. But when I grew up, that's what they talked about. And I finally understood. It's a voice that doesn't have any sound. That's why it's a still voice. And it's very small in that it's not imposing and it's not demanding. It's sort of letting you know. It's the idea comes fleetingly through there. And you listen or you don't. And if you are open and receptive, you'll hear it. And lots of times you don't get the direction, and it's your choice. You can go whichever way you want. You can go with the way that seems more powerful. You can go with the way that seems more fun. You can go with the way that seems to have the most potential for growth. But you never really know, because you're going into unknown territory, and you can only sort of guess at whether it'll be this or that. And there's no wrong choice. Every choice will take you somewhere. That's part of the next mystery lesson. I think it's the next one. Anyway. Does this answer?
Mm-hmm. So it's like we pray for guidance, and then we follow it through with intention.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I came up with what to me is the ultimate prayer for me. And I did as a teenager, and I've never found one I would go beyond. For me, let every person I touch be better because I touched them. That's it. Built into that is they don't have to like me. They don't have to think they got anything from me. But let me live a life in such a way that I touch each person, helping them to become who they are. In some small way, it may be that they won't even get the use of it for 20 years. But let every person I touch somehow be better because I walk for a moment in their path. And I've never found a prayer that was more selfish nor more altruistic. Again, it's the duality. It's both at once. It's the most selfish prayer in the universe, to want to feel like your life has that much meaning. At the same time, it's a life in which you want really, truly to care about others. So it's both. And frequently life is the two extremes combined in one place.
What about bargaining in prayer?
What about bargaining?
Yeah, I mean, is there such a thing as bargaining?
Oh yes, like I said, but if you make a bargain with God, God, just do this for me, and I'll do something for you, you know.
Well, I guess I made a bargain with God. I was really young when I had my first child, like 15, and my daughter was born with a birth defect, and she went through a lot of operations. And I prayed to God that I would spend the rest of my life helping other people if He would make my daughter live. Because each time she would come from an operation, I kept thinking she could die. You know, and I was a young mother with this child. And I did go on to college and raise my daughter. And I'm a psychologist and a social worker. I just had a bad experience with my job about a couple of months ago. And I'm kind of out of that field right now. I may enter it again. But I'm to the point where I've 25 years I spent as a social worker and a psychologist, and I'm thinking, I really want to get out of that field.
Okay.
So, I mean, yes, I feel guilty.
Oh, wait a minute. All right. No, that's very good. That's very good. All right. You made a bargain. Now you need to do something beyond that. Now you need to say to God, thank you, God, without asking anything of you, let my life have meaning for others. Does that make sense?
Well, yeah, it does, except that, I mean, I didn't put a limit on what
I know, but just say, thank you, God, I have grown beyond it. Say, I understood, I asked this as a bargain, but now with no limitation, I want to say to you, this is something I have come to wake up to, that what's important is that I give to life. That I do it, not because of the bargain, but because it is in my heart to do it. You understand what I'm saying? You tell God you've gone beyond the bargain. That you thank Him, and you know He let you use the bargain to reach the point where you became aware that you didn't need to make a bargain, that it is what all of our lives are about. Does this make sense?
Yeah. I mean, my daughter's 41 now, and she's still alive, and...
Well, that she'll live or die according to her life.
Right.
And that was always so, believe it or not. She didn't live for you. She lived because God wanted her to live. Mm-hmm. Because something in her had a reason to live. And you realize, when you wake up and realize that, and you know you're here because God has something for you. Mm-hmm. And as long as you're here, you wish to be of service. You don't have to do it through being a social worker. You don't have to do it through being a psychologist. You can go work at a mission. You can go take food to the homeless. You can grow a garden full of vegetables and share them with your neighbors. You can do whatever you do. But you do it out of a loving heart and a connection to others. And the bargain helps you grow to the place where you can see that this is so even without the bargain. Does this make? It's not that you have to go on doing this to fulfill the bargain.
I guess
that's what I want you to understand. You
well, yeah, I didn't want to feel guilty about if I decide I don't want to. I can always be a healthy person, like you said.
That's it.
Regardless of being in a professional.
Exactly. But that's the whole thing. It's not a. You see, you made a bargain, and God let you do it because that was His way of helping you to learn what life is really about. You see, God's half of that bargain was that you wake up to know you didn't need the bargain.
Well, I didn't wait, but...
Right. But the thing is, you were expressing your love for your child, and God understood this. But He didn't let the child survive because you asked Him. He was glad you asked Him. Unless your child is a bodhisattva, in which case the child may have come into the world to ask you to get this connection to God through your prayer. You never know. I don't think we can ever know why another person is here. Sometimes they can tell us some part of why they're here. But the knowing is what comes from inside your heart. And God doesn't blame. And if you get out of this professional, if you feel that this isn't where you want to be, then you don't leave it. I mean, where do you think the feelings come from?
I think a lot of it is because it seems like the people that you do the most for, and this is a real negative thought, but the people that you do the most for seem to be the ones that bite you in the hand. And that's one of the reasons I feel like I want to do something else. Does that make sense?
Sure. It all makes sense.
And maybe it's just the type of work I've been doing.
Who have you been working?
Well, the last 14 years I've been working with hemodialysis and chronic chronically yoked people.
Mhm.
And I know that, anger is a lot of what's going on with them when they're dealing with their illness, but, it seems
And they're
like
angry at God for making you ill.
and that's true, and they're angry, but it all comes back on the person who's helping them usually. And maybe I'm taking it personally, but I've talked to a lot of people who feel the
It's
same
very
way.
difficult to be the recipient of that much negativity. It is very negative. The only way you can is if your heart is so filled with love and not that you're never touched by it, because what comes out of you overwhelms that. And it is the only way to live in a situation like that. Not just yours, but many, many, many people who carry depression. They have to be coming from such a space inside themselves and so filled with who they are. It has to be so completely coming out of this love and not. I was talking about Ma'at. You know about Ma'at. It's a term the ancient Egyptians had, and it's a very important thing. I guess this is really the right time, the right place to share this. According to the ancients, there was one God, one masculine, creative function. And they gave him a name, Kanun. And there was one feminine aspect of God, which they called Ma'at. He created, generated everything. And she gave order to what he generated. It would equate to the Father and the Holy Spirit in many, many ways. Everything that was created was generated by the masculine part of God, which they made two separate deities, but it was the whole thing. And they said everything has its own Ma'at. A mouse will be a mouse. Grass will be grass. A palm tree will be a palm tree. Wind will be wind. Everything in creation has its own nature, its own Ma'at, its own natural order. And everything that exists will express the natural order of what it is. It will express it in response to all kinds of environmental factors that it encounters. But it will be what it is. And man will be what man is. But fascinatingly enough, they said that man, in all of creation, had one ability and responsibility, same difference, that nothing else in creation had. In the Bible it says we were created in God's image. I never thought that meant God looked like me. I always felt that I and trees and dogs and everything were all small parts of what God was. But when you understand the ancient Egyptian teaching, it makes sense, because they said that only man had the ability to create Ma'at. The ability of God to create order out of chaos was the ability that man had that nothing else had, to create order out of chaos. And most of the chaos we encounter is our own lives, which are not in a form of order, but also recycling or everything around us. It's all about creating order. And when it said man was given dominion over the earth, it meant man was made the caretaker of the earth, because the word dominion, both to the Jewish people, to the Egyptians, it also meant well-being. So when you talked about dominion, you were talking about the well-being. In the man's hands, not was put the use of the earth, but the well-being. We were made caretakers. And we had this ability to create order out of chaos. And that's what Ma'at is. It's always order. Sometimes it's harmony. Sometimes it's justice. Real justice, not legal. Rightness. It's balance, but it's not like, once in a great while it's a static balance, but more often it's the balance of riding a unicycle, or it's a moving, flowing thing, harmony. All of these things. Love, which is not possessive and cannot be corrupted into hatred or jealousy or things like this, that love is a part of Ma'at. Ma'at is the highest moral order man's ever come up with in any civilization. And that is our whole function and purpose, is to create Ma'at in our life. Does that make sense? And the thing is, you see it demonstrated in human reproduction. A man generates the child, and in her womb, she gives order to it. But ultimately, the child is born and must complete itself. And that's what they believed about the universe. That God began it. Out of chaos, He began creating order. And we are supposed to continue the creation until we have brought it all into order. And that is our function. And that's the purpose of every single human being on the planet, even if most of them don't know it. Their purpose is to create order where they encounter chaos. And what you're talking about in your work is chaos for you. So either you have to find a way to create order there, or if you feel it's beyond your capacity, then go find some place where you can create order. Whether it's, like I said, whether it's growing a garden, or just talking to people, offering a university course, anything. But that's what life is about. For each of us, we will create our own individual order. I think Paul here wants to get his degree in psychology because he wants to help people. And that's just, he just had a beautiful
an awakening
experience that told him this is where he wants to go with his life. So now he wants to study and go into these things.
And before that, it was really difficult. My life had no purpose, no direction. Now I think I've found my purpose.
Now that he's coming from a sense of purpose, he's going to go acquire the skills to go with it. You've got the skills. And the thing is, it's to come from your center that it's your purpose, not that it's honoring a bargain. Do you understand what I'm saying? And that's important. It's really important.
Well, I think at this point I feel like you said, you talked about the chaos, and I want some harmony in my life, and going in, working every day in this particular group
I couldn't do it.
of people that are just
I could not do it, I tell you right
are
now.
always angry, and it gets put on me, and then I have to explain why I did certain things, which I feel like followed the way I've learned to do things as a social worker. And of course I just feel like I need to step out of that.
You're in the middle. You're in the middle right now, where you are. You have people above you who want this, and they're running by rules without any, there's a thing that we have, it's talking about soul ages, and it said, you need the help of a psychiatrist, and certain people do, and by this we don't mean a young soul with a degree. You have people above you who frequently are young souls who have the book knowledge but no understanding heart of what it is. And then you have the patients who have the anger and do things, and you're caught in the middle between them.
Yeah, you're seeing exactly the way it is. And I think it's more like the young people that are over you who have no life experiences.
Right, but they're also young souls.
Right, young souls, like you said.
A young soul is different than a young person, and they could be an older person and still be a young soul. They are totally materially focused on the power, material, everything.
Power and material.
Oh, absolutely. And they learn all the rules, and they learn the superficial psychology, but they don't have the understanding heart of it. It's like Gestalt therapy. You could learn all of the things that he talks about, but the thing is, you don't have to analyze your dreams. You can take somebody else's dreams you've never even met. As long as you assign characteristics within yourself to those dreams, you're getting your own characteristics out there and beginning to look at yourself and see yourself. So, and many people don't understand that who are practicing psychologists, unfortunately.
Well, in the medical field, you have someone above you that isn't practicing psychology, they're in nursing field.
And that's even worse.
Yeah, because they don't understand what you're doing, and you know this is the right way to do it.
By the way, I have to share with you, because of what you are, my oldest son, who happens to be a paranoid schizophrenic, but he had a degree in music and a degree in psychology. He was a semester away from a degree in physics. But he had joined a little Gestalt therapy group at college. And the man convening it, they had told each person he wanted them to take their problem and create a gospel, or create a situation in which it was expressed. And this one girl had difficulty being able to relate to anybody because she kept coming up with criticisms of everyone. This voice isn't right, that one's too fat, this one. There was just something wrong with every person. And it kept her from being able to have any relationship. And so he suggested to her that she build a wall around herself of bricks, each brick being one of these things that was wrong with people. That seemed like a great idea, so she built the wall. And he said, all right, now take a brick out of the wall. She did. She put it down her feet. It flew back into the wall. He said, well, take the brick out and this time throw it away. And she did. And she said it flew back into the wall, at which point he was out of ideas and went on to somebody else in the group. Well, when the session was over, my son went up to her and he said, would you make your wall for me? And she said, okay, and she did. And he said, and where's my arm? And she said, it's sticking through my wall. And he took her hand and he said, and where is your arm? And she said, it's sticking through my wall. He said, good, and he yanked her outside.
Oh my God.
Because he understood that it was a theoretical wall and he didn't have to deal with it in a concrete way. And actually, that was it. She was able to leave behind her all those criticisms and start having relationships. It was that simple. That's why I got a degree in psychology. But anyway, I thought you'd enjoy the story. The book is Anyway. And it's a fascinating thing. He wrote these set of Paradoxical Commandments. It was part of a thesis, I believe it was, in college. Going for a doctorate or something, I don't remember what. And he made copies of these, and they got passed around a little bit. Years later, he was reading a book about Mother Teresa. And the author said, on the wall there at the convent are these commandments. -2 of the commandments are his actually word-for-word paradoxical commandments. And it was just absolutely fascinating that they have spread all over the world. So he wrote this book anyway and tells you all about how he came to write them and everything. But they were his, and he had the documentation. They really came from him. But I love these paradoxical commandments, so I wrote out just a list of the commandments to give out. People are illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered. Love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Do good anyway. If you are successful, you will win false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. The good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. The biggest men and women with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest men and women with the smallest minds. Think big anyway. People favor underdogs. They follow only top dogs. Fight for a few underdogs anyway. What you spend years building may be destroyed overnight. Build anyway. People really need help, but they may attack you if you help them. Help people anyway. Give the world the best you have and you'll get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best you have anyway. Then there's the symptoms of inner peace. An unmistakable ability to enjoy each moment. Frequent, overwhelming episodes of appreciation. A loss of interest in judging other people. A loss of interest in judging yourself. A loss of interest in interpreting the actions of others. And a loss of interest in conflict. A loss of the ability to worry. This is a very serious symptom. Also a tendency to think and act spontaneously rather than from fears based on past experiences. Contented feelings of connectedness with others and with nature. Frequent attacks of smiling through the eyes from the heart. An increasing tendency to let things happen rather than make them happen. And an increased susceptibility to love extended by others, as well as the uncontrollable urge to extend love. Warning, if you have all or even most of the above symptoms, please be advised that your condition of peace may be so far advanced as to be incurable. If you are exposed to anyone exhibiting several of these symptoms, remain exposed at your own risk. The condition of peace is highly contagious. But please remember, the phrase peace and quiet means peace isn't necessarily quiet. In fact, it seldom is. It can be a joyful noise or a lot of loud noise. Peace is not quiet. They wouldn't have had to make the phrase peace and quiet if it were. Once in a while, I guess. A couple of these. You see. I'm me. I'm special. There's no one else just like me. I have a special name given to me when I was born. No one has a voice just like mine. No one has fingerprints like mine. I can do some things easily. I can do some things well. Some things are hard to do, and some things I cannot do well yet. I can do many things now that I couldn't do when I was a child. As I grow older, I will be able to do more things than I can do now. I do not have to be good at everything. I can make mistakes. I have feelings. I may be happy, sad, angry, tired, or have other feelings. I can learn some good ways to show my feelings. No one can know what I think or how I feel unless I tell them or show them, even if they think they can. I am like others in some ways. I am different from others in some ways. If I know that I am special, I know that others can be special too. When I share my own ideas or do things in my own way, I am being creative. My thoughts and ideas are important. Other people's ideas are important too. I am likable to someone. I am lovable to someone. I can learn to like others. I can learn to love others. I'm me. I'm special. There is no one else just like me. And then this is a much longer form. It's what one of my students wrote after knowing me for 2 or 3 years. It was part of his getting his degree in psychology, believe it or not. Let's see, where he wrote this for. And you can read that. I can take a short. I'll be right back. Okay? Some of which is all old hat to you, I'm sure.
Yeah, I've heard some of this. But it's nice to see it again, you know.
I agree.
I keep these things and then it's like they get stuck somewhere in my file and then
Right.
I don't see them again.
One of my favorite ones that I came up with is, and I think this is true, absolutely true, more so all the time. Life is like a piece of Swiss cheese, and most people are busy living in the holes of what they don't have, what they can't do, instead of on the cheese of what they are and what they can do. And it's absolutely the way people live their lives in this society. You're beginning to have some idea of what you want to do with your life?
What am I doing?
As I said, it's not, you may need to earn money, you may not, I have no idea, good investments or whatever. But I love the book Illusions. Did you ever read it? By Richard Bach. In the book Illusions, there's the handbook of the reluctant Messiah. It's a little piece of it. And there's a test to know whether your purpose in life has been achieved. If you're alive, it hasn't.
If you're alive, it hasn't.
That's right.
Oh.
As long as you're alive, there's something more you can do. I love that. It's just... And I can't remember who it was that said it, that when you die and go to heaven, God will not ask you, why didn't you cure this incredible disease? Didn't ask you, why didn't you create world peace? God will only ask you one thing. Why weren't you you? And that's the key. By the way, if you want to find some really wonderful books, Rabbi Krishna has written some wonderful books. And you can see his growth through them.
And the other book that you mentioned was Illusions.
Oh yes, I don't know if that's even still available. But it's by Richard Bach.
Unity. If no place else has it, Unity will have it. Unity bookstore on it.
Oh, I can tell you a lot of wonderful books. I love books.
Me too.
But I may even have a copy if you want. I mean, I'll look and see if I've got a spare one. So whenever I come across them, I get them. So I may have one to swallow.
Who wrote Illusions?
Huh? Richard Bach. He's the one that wrote Johnson, Livingston, Seagull. He also wrote a book called One, which I highly recommend. O-N-E.
I
By
think we had
Richard
to
Bach.
read that in school. That's where the name. Yeah, we had to read that in one of the classes. I thought it was that reason.
One, it's a number of different chapters. I won't recommend every book of his. Some of them are better than others, but Illusions is one of the two that I recommend beyond the others. Sonia Friedman, Men Are Just Dessert, is an incredible book. And it's a terrible book for men too. Men Are Just Dessert. The whole idea is you are your own main course. Relationships are marvelous. They can be very fulfilling as dessert, but you first have to be who you are. And she writes with a great deal of wit. Her second book was Smart Cookies Don't Crumble, which is all about going through divorce and such. Relationships are in. But they're marvelous books. Irene Casorla wrote Go For It, in which she talks about every successful person has had a number of failures in which they learn how to be successful. The successful aren't people who just come up and do things. They are people who keep doing things and it doesn't work, and they learn from it and they build on what they gain, which is what we all are supposed to be doing, growing instead of just getting there. And she sees success as a process. But now to me, and the thing is, goals are very, very good. This is very important. There's only one function of a goal, though: to give you direction. A goal gives you direction in which you go toward it. It is not important that you achieve it. It's always important that you have a goal. But frequently, on the way to one goal, you will see another goal you wouldn't have seen if you were on the way to the first one.
Kind of relates to the mysteries, doesn't it?
In many ways. But that goal will take you towards someplace. And if you see a new goal, it's perfectly valid to drop the first and go to the second, which you wouldn't have even seen if you hadn't been going toward the first. So what goals do, their function is to give you direction. Same as the totem. Its function is to say what you're reaching for. Again, it's a goal. That's what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Like the mysteries of is, actually trying to find the answer. Mm-hmm. You explained it better. It was like
as you were talking about the ancient mysteries, because we offer Egyptian mystery lessons to people who come out. My husband's teach hieroglyphics, ancient Egyptian mysteries, like this. But the whole thing is, the mysteries couldn't be written down. The lessons don't teach you the mysteries. The lessons teach you ways in which to begin to look at things, and that makes you have questions, and the questions you have, then you find answers for, and the answers cause more questions, and that's how you uncover the mysteries. So no mystery could be stolen, no mystery was ever written down, because you have to find it for yourself by being on the path. So there was no way of doing it, because if you weren't on the path toward it, you wouldn't understand it if you stumbled across it. So you have to sort of be open to seeing and experiencing, and that's a goal. It takes you toward seeing new goals. So that's what goals do, they give direction. And the mysteries are all within us. And that's the only place we'll ever uncover them. You can talk to people. You can take my class. You can take other people's classes. But when you take them, the things you take away should cause you to start thinking about and becoming aware of your own life. And in looking at your own life, then your questions will lead you to answers which give you more questions, which is what it's really all about. There's no right and wrong. There is order and chaos. And in thinking in terms of right and wrong, it's devastating. Good and bad, right and wrong are such arbitrary words. But the idea of order and chaos works. Is this going to create order, harmony, justice, rightness? And if it doesn't, why am I bothering to do it? But sometimes, just for the fun of it. And that's okay too. Because even fun is a kind of order. But if it just perpetuates the chaos, that's ridiculous. And if we start looking in terms of order and chaos, we'll make better decisions than if we start looking in terms of right and wrong, or good and bad. And your order and chaos may not be the same as mine. It's not important that it be. It's important that each person find their own. My favorite parable in any religion happens to be a Buddhist parable. And it's the story of the three vehicles. And in it, a prince is returning from a journey, and he has three sons that have been left at home, and in these days palaces were made of wood. So when he sees that there are flames, he realizes it's a very serious thing. And he calls to his sons to come out, and they're so busy doing their own thing, none of them hear him. But he's a very wise and loving father, and he understands his three sons, so he calls to the youngest one and he said, "Come see the wonderful goat cart waiting for you." Now this is what this kid wants the most in the whole world, so he comes out, he hears these words, and he's saved. And he calls to the second son, he said, "Come see the wonderful pony cart waiting for you." Well, he's offered the thing this boy wants the most in the world, so this boy also hears his words. And he calls to his oldest boy and he said, "Come see the fine horse and carriage waiting for you." And once again, by offering what the boy wants the most, his words are heard. Well, he leaves his people to take care of the flames, and he immediately takes his son into town. And first they go to the horse dealer, and he requires that he produce the three finest horses that he can, three finest carriage horses. Then he goes to the carriage maker, and he orders him to build the three finest carriages that he can build. And the whole idea of this parable, as the Buddhists express it, is that each one of us will reach for the goal that we understand, but ultimately each of us will achieve the highest goal. And to me, I love it because it says, I don't have to see the same goal that you see. I don't have to see with your eyes, and you don't have to see with mine. Not only that, I don't have to be seeing the further goal. Maybe your goal is beyond mine. Maybe mine is beyond yours. Maybe we're both off to the side going towards some third one we neither of us yet see. The whole point is I can only go to the goal that I can understand and reach for, and so can you. So what I want to do is each person I want to encourage to find their goal. But it allows me to walk in harmony with anybody on any path as long as they're going on a spiritual path. And that's why it's my favorite parable. It is misinterpreted by some Hindus, not all, to say the ends justify the means. Very bad interpretation. Very shallow interpretation. Anyway, it's about time to leave. So there are two things I want to share with you before we end the class. One of them is my poem. I've written 3 poems in my life. One as a child, 2 as an adult. One of them is strictly about an experience in my own life and my husband's. And then this one. And this one I just had the brains to come inside and get something to write it with. Because I was sitting outdoors, it was probably fall. It had rained earlier. The clouds, the clouds sometimes, it's just absolutely beautiful. The clouds go across the moon, and they're not totally there. Just absolutely beautiful. And spiders have been spinning their web, and the raindrops were caught on this one spider web. And I had this little cat, and I was drinking a cup of milk, and he was sticking his paw in my cup and getting his own milk. And it was just sort of all came together, and this poem was simply there. And so I think the only thing I really take credit for is going in and writing it down. But it expresses where I'm coming from very, very much. It's called It Is Enough. If all that exists is this moment in which I can be fully alive, if I can reach out with caring to another being, then this moment exists as one drop of beauty in the sea of infinity, and it is enough. If all else is illusion, no heaven to come, no God to satisfy. If existence is the mad joke of a senseless universe, then my joy, my wonder, and my love will fill it, and it is enough. A cat's paw reaching, a tree silhouetted at sunset, the magic of a spider's web, the smell of warm smoke, the world reflected in a raindrop. By any one of these is the existence of God proven, and it is enough.